I'm back, and we're going to read some more in Charlotte's Web. So the last time we were reading, remember Wilbur was trying to spin a web and figured out that he couldn't. And he's really worried because he heard what Zuckerman is planning on doing with him at Christmas. But Charlotte's made a promise, so we'll see if she comes through with her promise today. But this one is called an explosion, and remember I told you to think about what kind of explosion could be on a farm. Day after day, the spider waited, head down, for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur that she would save his life, she was determined to keep her promise. Charlotte was naturally patient. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web. And she knew for sure if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, an idea would come to her mind. Finally, one morning, toward the middle of July, the idea came. Why, how perfectly simple, she said to herself. That's the way to save Wilbur's life, is to play a trick on Zuckerman. If I can fool a bug, thought Charlotte, I can surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs. Wilbur walked into his yard just at that moment. What are you thinking about, Charlotte? He asked. I was thinking, said the spider, that people are very gullible. What does gullible mean? Easy to fool, said Charlotte. That's a mercy, replied Wilbur, as he lay down in the shade at his fence and went to sleep. The spider, however, stayed wide awake, gazing affectionately at him and making plans for his future. Summer was half gone, and she knew she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery Arable wandered into the Zuckerman's front yard, followed by Fern. Avery carried a live frog in his hand. Fern had a crown of daisies in her hair, and the children ran for the kitchen. Just in time for a piece of blueberry pie, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Look at my frog, said Avery, placing the frog on the drain board and holding out his hand for pie. Take that thing out of here, said Mrs. Zuckerman. He's hot, said Fern. He's almost dead, that frog. He is not, said Avery. He lets me scratch him behind his eyes. The frog jumped and landed in Mrs. Zuckerman's dishpan full of soapy water. You're getting your pie on me, said Fern. Can I look for eggs in the hen house, Aunt Edith? Run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens. It's getting all over everything, shouted Fern. His pie's all over his front. Come on, frog, said Avery. He scooped up his frog. The frog kicked splashing soapy water onto the blueberry pie. Another crisis, groaned Fern. Let's swing in the swing, said Avery. The children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the county. It was a single long piece of heavy rope tied to a beam over the north doorway. At the bottom end of the rope was a fat knot to sit on, and it was arranged so you could swing without being pushed. You climbed up the ladder to the hayloft, then holding the rope, you stood at the edge and looked down, and were scared and dizzy. Then you straddled the knot that acted like a seat. Then you got up all your nerve, took a deep breath, and jumped. For a second, you seemed to be falling to the barn floor far below, but then suddenly the rope would catch you, and you would sail through the barn door, going a mile a minute, with the wind whistling in your eyes and ears and hair. Then you would zoom upward into the sky and look up at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would twist and turn with the rope. And then you drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back into the barn, almost into the hayloft. Then sail out again, but not quite as far this time, and in again, not quite as high. Then out again and in again, then out, then in, and then you jump off and fall down and let somebody else try it. Mothers for miles worried about Zuckerman's swing. They feared some child would jump off, but no child ever did. Children almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think they will. Avery put the frog in his front pocket, climbed to the hayloft. The last time I swung on this swing, I almost crashed into a barn swallow, he yelled. Take that frog out, ordered Fern. Avery straddled the rope and jumped. He sailed out through the door, frog and all, and into the sky, frog and all, and then he sailed back into the barn. Your tongue is purple, screamed Fern. So is yours, cried Avery, sailing out again with the frog. I have hay inside my dress and it itches, called Fern. Scratch it, yelled Avery, and he sailed back. It's my turn, said Fern. Jump off. Fern's got the itch, sang Avery. When he jumped off, he threw the swing up to his sister. She shut her eyes tight and jumped, and felt dizzy drop, and then the supporting lift of the swing. When she opened her eyes, she was looking up into the blue sky and was about to fly back into the door. They took turns for about an hour. Then the children grew tired of swinging, and they went down toward the pastures and picked wild raspberries and ate them. Their tongues turned from purple to red. Fern bit into a raspberry that had a bad-tasting bug inside it and got discouraged. Avery found an empty candy box and put his frog in it. The frog seemed tired after his morning in the swing, and the children walked slowly back up to the barn. They too were tired and hardly had energy enough to walk. "Let's build a tree house," suggested Avery. "I want to live in a tree with my frog." "I'm going to visit Wilbur," Fern announced. They climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily toward the pig pen. Wilbur heard them coming and got up, and Avery noticed the spider web, and, coming closer, he saw Charlotte. "Hey, look at that big spider," he said. "It's tremendous." "Leave it alone," commanded Fern. "You've got a frog, isn't that enough?" "That's a fine spider. I'm going to capture it," said Avery. He took the cover off the candy box. He picked up a stick. "I'm going to knock that old spider into this box," he said. Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. This might be the end of Charlotte if the boys succeeded in catching her. "You stop it, Avery," said Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence of the pig pen. He was just about to raise his stick to hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and toppled and landed on the edge of Wilbur's trough. The trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was right underneath. There was a dull explosion as the egg broke, and then a horrible smell. Fern screamed. Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with the terrible gases and smells from the rotten egg. Templeton, who had been resting in his home, scuttled away into the barn. "Good night," screamed Avery. "Good night. What a stink. Let's get out of here." Fern was crying. She held her nose and ran toward the house, and Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see him go. It had been a narrow escape. Later on that morning, the animals came up from the pasture: the sheep, the lambs, the gander, the goose, and 7 goslings. There were many complaints about the awful smell, and Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again about how the arable boy had tried to capture Charlotte, and how the smell of the broken egg drove him away just in time. "It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life," said Wilbur. The goose was proud of her share of the adventure. "I'm delighted that egg never hatched," she gabbled. Templeton, of course, was miserable over the loss of the beloved egg. He couldn't resist boasting. "It pays to save things," he said in a surly voice. "A rat never knows when something's going to come in handy. I never throw anything away." "Well," said one of the lambs, "this whole business is all well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? The smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn that's perfumed with rotten egg?" "Don't worry, you'll get used to it," said Templeton. He sat up and pulled wisely on his long whiskers and then crept away to pay a visit to the dump. When Lurvy showed up at lunchtime carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped short a few paces of the pig pen and sniffed the air and made a face. "Whoo, what in thunder," he said. Setting the pail down, he picked up a stick that Avery had dropped and pried the trough open. "Rats," he said. "Phew, I might have known a rat would have a nest under this trough. How I hate a rat." Lurvy dragged Wilbur's trough across the yard and kicked up some dirt into the rat's nest, burying the broken egg and all of Templeton's other possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trough, drooling with hunger. Lurvy poured. The slops ran creamily down around the pig's ears and eyes. Wilbur grunted. He gulped and sucked and sucked and gulped, making swishing and swooshing noises, anxious to get everything at once. It was a delicious meal. Skimmed milk, wheat middlings, leftover pancakes, half a donut, a rind of summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, a third of a ginger snap, a fishtail, an orange peel, several noodles from noodle soup, the scum off a cup of cocoa, an ancient jelly roll, a strip of paper from the lining of the garbage pail, and a spoonful of raspberry jello. Wilbur ate heartily and planned to leave half a noodle and a few drops of milk for Templeton, and then he remembered that the rat had been useful in saving Charlotte's life, and that Charlotte was trying to save his life, so he left a whole noodle instead of a half. Now that the broken egg was buried, the air cleared and the barn smelled good again. The afternoon passed and evening came and shadows lengthened. The cool and kindly breath of evening entered through the doors and windows. Astride her wig, Charlotte sat moodily eating a horsefly and thinking about the future. After a while, she bestirred herself. She descended to the center of the web, and there she began to cut some of her lines. She worked slowly and steadily while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was at work. Deep in his soft bed, Wilbur snoozed, and in their favorite corner, the goslings whistled a night song. Charlotte tore quite a section out of her web, leaving only an open space in the middle. Then she started weaving something to take the place of the thread she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump around midnight, the spider was still at work. This is called the miracle. The next day was foggy and everything on the barn was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet and the asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy mornings, Charlotte's web was truly a thing of beauty. This morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made a pattern of loveliness and mystery like a delicate veil. Even Lurby, who was particularly interested in beauty, noticed the web when he came with the pig's breakfast. He noted how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully built it was. And then he took another look, and he saw something that made him set his pail down. There in the center of the web, neatly woven in block letters, was a message, and it said, "Some pig." Lurby felt weak. He brushed his hand across his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's web. There's the web. "I'm seeing things," he whispered. He dropped to his knees and uttered a short prayer, and forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's the trouble?" said Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with the pig?" No, not exactly," said Lurby. "Come and see for yourself." The two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard. Lurby pointed at the spider's web. "Do you see what I see?" he asked. Zuckerman stared at the writing in the web, and then he murmured the words, "Some pig," and then he looked at Lurby, and they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy after her night's exertions, smiled as she watched. Wilbur came and stood directly under the web. "Some pig," muttered Lurby in a low voice. "Some pig," whispered Mr. Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur, and then they stared at Charlotte. "You don't suppose that spider," began Mr. Zuckerman, but he shook his head and didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he walked solemnly back up to the house and spoke to his wife. "Edith, something's happened," he said in a weak voice. He went into the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. "I've got something to tell you, Edith," he said. You better sit down." Mrs. Zuckerman sank in her chair, and she looked pale and frightened. "Edith," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I think you'd best be told that we have a very unusual pig." A look of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. "Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about?" She said, "This is a serious thing, Edith. Our pig is completely out of the ordinary." "What's unusual about a pig?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman, who was beginning to recover from her scare. "Well, I don't really know yet," said Mr. Zuckerman. "But we've received a sign, Edith, a mysterious sign. A miracle had happened on this farm. There's a large spider's web in the doorway of the barn, right over the pig pen. And when Lurby went to feed the pig this morning, he noticed the web was because it was foggy. And you know how spider webs looks very distinct in the fog. And right spang in the middle of the web were the words 'some pig.' The words were actually woven right into the web. They're actually part of the web, Edith. I know, because I've been down there and seen them. It says 'some pig' just as clear can be. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake about it. A miracle has happened, and the sign has occurred here on earth, right on our farm, that we have no ordinary pig." "Well," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "it seems to me you're a little off. It seems to me we have no ordinary spider." "Oh, no," said Mr. Zuckerman. "It's the pig that's unusual. It says that right in the middle of the web." "Maybe so," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "but just the same, I intend to have a look at the spider." "It's a common old gray spider," said Zuckerman. They got up, and together they walked down to Wilbur's yard. "You see, Edith, it's a common gray spider." Wilbur was pleased to have received so much attention. Lurby was still standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three, stood for about an hour reading the words in the web over and over and watching Wilbur. Charlotte was delighted with the way her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle and listened to the conversation of the people. When a small fly blundered into the web just beyond the word pig, Charlotte dropped down quickly, rolled the fly up, and carried it out of the web. After a while, the fog lifted. The web dried off, and the words didn't show up as plainly. The Zuckermans and Lurby walked back to the house. But just before they left the pig pen, Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur. "You know," he said in an important voice, I thought all along that pig of ours is extra good one. He's a solid pig. That pig's as solid as they come." "You notice how solid he is around the shoulders, Lurby?" Sure I do," said Lurby. I've always noticed that pig. He's quite a pig." "He's long and he's smooth," said Zuckerman. "That's right," said Lurby. "He's as smooth as they come. That's some pig." When Mr. Zuckerman got back to the house, he took off his work clothes and put on his best suit. Then he got into his car and drove to the minister's house. He stayed for an hour and explained to the minister that a miracle had happened on the farm. "So far," said Zuckerman, "only 4 people on earth know about this miracle. Myself, my wife Edith, my hired hand Lurby, and you. Don't tell anyone else," said the minister. "We don't know what that means yet. But perhaps, if I give thought to it, I can explain it in my sermon next Sunday. There can be no doubt that we have a most unusual pig. I intend to speak about it in my sermon and point out the fact that this community has been visited with a wondrous animal. By the way, does your pig have a name?" "Why, yes," said Mr. Zuckerman. "My little niece calls him Wilbur. She's rather a strange child, full of notions. She raised the pig on a bottle and I bought him from her when he was a month old. He shook hands with the minister and left. Secrets are hard to keep, and long before Sunday the news spread all over the county. Everyone knew that a sign had appeared in the spider's web on the Zuckerman place. Everybody knew that the Zuckermans had a wondrous pig. People came from miles around to look at Wilbur and read the words in Charlotte's Web. The Zuckermans' driveway was full of cars and trucks from morning till night. Ford, Chevys, Buick Roadmasters, GMC pickups, Plymouths, Studebakers, Packers, DeSotos, and Oldsmobiles with rocket engines, Jeep station wagons, and Pontiacs. The news of the wonderful pig spread clear up in the hills, and farmers came rattling down in buggies and buckboards to stand hour after hour at Wilbur's pen, admiring the miraculous animal. All said they had never seen such a pig before in their lives. When Fern told her mother that Avery had tried to hit the Zuckerman spider with a stick, Mrs. Arable was so shocked she sent Avery to bed without any supper as punishment. In the days that followed, Mr. Zuckerman was so busy entertaining visitors that he neglected his farm work. He wore his good clothes all the time now, got right into them when he got up in the morning, and Mrs. Zuckerman prepared special meals for Wilbur. Lurvy shaved and got a haircut, and his principal farm duty was to feed the pig while people looked on. Mr. Zuckerman ordered Lurvy to increase Wilbur's feedings from 3 meals a day to 4 meals a day. The Zuckermans were so busy with visitors they forgot about the other things on the farm. The blackberries got ripe, and Mrs. Zuckerman failed to put up any blackberry jam. The corn needed hoeing, and Lurvy didn't have time to hoe it. On Sunday, the church was full. The minister explained the miracle, and he said the words on the spiderweb proved that human beings must always be on the watch for the coming of wonders. All in all, the Zuckerman's pig pen was the center of attraction. Fern was happy, for she felt that Charlotte's trick was working and that Wilbur's life would be saved. But she found that the barn was not nearly as pleasant. There were too many people. She liked it better when she could be all alone with her friends, the animals. And this one is called A Meeting. One evening, just a few days after the writing had appeared in Charlotte's Web, the spider called a meeting of all the animals in the barn cellar. I shall begin by calling roll. Wilbur, here, said the pig. Gander, here, 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 said the gander. You sound like 3 ganders, muttered Charlotte. Why can't you just say here? Why do you have to repeat everything? It's my idiosyncrasy, replied the gander. Goose, said Charlotte. Here, 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 said the goose. Charlotte glared at her. Goslings 1 through 7. Beep, 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 said the goslings. This is getting to be quite a meeting, said Charlotte. Anyone would think we had 3 ganders, 3 geese, and 21 goslings. Sheep, hee-haw, answered the sheep all together. Lambs, hee-haw, answered the lambs all together. Templeton, no answer. Templeton, no answer. Well, we're all here except the rat, said Charlotte. I guess we can proceed without him. Now, all of you must have noticed what's been going on around here the last few days. The message I wrote in the web praising Wilbur had been received. The Zuckermans have fallen for it, and so has everyone else. Zuckerman thinks Wilbur's an unusual pig, and therefore he won't want to kill him and eat him. I dare say my trick will work, and Wilbur's life will be saved. Hooray! Cried everybody. Thank you very much, said Charlotte. Now I called this meeting in order to get some suggestions. I need new ideas for the web. People are already getting sick of reading the word some pig, and if anybody can think of another message or remark, I'd be glad to weave it into the web. Any suggestions for a new slogan? How about Pig Supreme, said one of the lambs. No good, said Charlotte. It sounds like a rich dessert. How about terrific, 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 asked the goose. Cut that down to 1 terrific, and it will do very nicely, said Charlotte. I think terrific might impress Zuckerman. But Charlotte, said Wilbur, I'm not terrific. That doesn't make a particle of difference, replied Charlotte. Not a particle. People believe most anything they see in print. Does anybody here know how to spell terrific? I think, said the gander, it's T-E-R-R-I-I-F-I-C-C-C-C. What kind of acrobat do you think I am, said Charlotte in disgust. I would have to do a dance to weave a word like that into my web. Sorry, 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 said the gander. Then the oldest sheep spoke up. I agree that there should be something new written in the web if Wilbur's life is to be saved. And if Charlotte needs some help finding words, I think she can get it from our friend Templeton. The rat visits the dump regularly and has access to old magazines. He can tear out bits of old advertisements and bring them here to the barn cellar so that Charlotte can have something to copy. Good idea, said Charlotte, but I'm not sure Templeton would be willing to help. You know how he is, always looking out for himself, never thinking of the other fellow. I bet I can get him to help, said the old sheep. I'll appeal to his basic instincts, of which he has plenty. Here he comes now. Everybody keep quiet while I put the matter up to him. The rat entered the barn, the way he always did, creeping along close to the wall. What's up? He asked, seeing the animals assembled. We're holding a directors' meeting, replied the old sheep. Well, break it up, said Templeton. Meetings bore me. And the rat began to climb the rope that hung against the wall. Look, said the old sheep. Next time you go to the dump, Templeton, bring back a clipping from a magazine. Charlotte needs some ideas so she can write messages in her web and save Wilbur's life. Let him die, said the old rat. Why should I worry? You'll worry all right when next winter comes, said the sheep. You'll worry all right on a 0 morning next January when Wilbur's dead and nobody comes here with a nice pail of warm slops to pour in the trough. Wilbur's leftover food's your chief source of supply, Templeton. You know that. Wilbur's food's your food. Therefore, Wilbur's destiny, yours destiny, is closely linked. Wilbur's killed, his trough stands empty day after day. You'll grow so thin we can read through your stomach and see objects on the other side. Templeton's whiskers quivered. Maybe you're right, he said gruffly. I'm making a trip to the dump tomorrow afternoon. I'll bring back a magazine clipping if I can find one. Thanks, said Charlotte. The meeting's now adjourned. I have a busy evening ahead of me. I've got to tear my web apart and write terrific. Wilbur blushed. But I'm not terrific, Charlotte. I'm just an average pig. You're terrific as far as I'm concerned, replied Charlotte sweetly, and that's what counts. You're my best friend, and I think you're sensational. Now stop arguing and go get some sleep. And we'll stop there this time, and next time we'll start and see what happens when Charlotte tries to write the next word in the web.